Well, hello everyone and welcome back to the Down Under Bunker here in Sydney, Australia. It's been a while. Since I've been able to play Axis and Allies itself, let alone film it so you guys can see what's happening. Keen to get back into it, but life has just been getting in the way and haven't had time to play, but now ready to go with one of my all-time favourites, 1914. Such a different game, this one, compared to the World War II fast-paced, sweeping across continents. This is more slow-paced, every move and die roll counts. Keen to get playing, but couple notes here, we are playing out-of-box rules, which means that the British can place as many units as they like down in India. See how the Ottoman can react to that. And for the optional Russian Revolution, I am opting not to play with that. Seeing how that works, I usually do play with that, so I'm keen to play a few games without it. And this could help the Allies or the Axis, depending on how it turns out. If the Germans can take Moscow and then push towards Paris, well, game over. But find out what happens after round one in just a moment. It's the end of round one, about to head into round two, and not your most typical round one here in 1914. Few differences, few interesting moves, a few battles that went badly and well for some and others. So let's jump in down here in Africa, where on the German turn they spread out all across Africa, taking 4 territories, and then the British came along, did some damage, took Belgian Congo, and that was the only German destroyed in the British turn. The artillery was destroyed as well, actually, but the British lost an artillery and 2 men on their turn, so advantage Germany for now, but the French are on their way. They have 2 transports, 4 more infantry. That will be enough, and the Italian dude can help out as well. Over here in the Ottoman Empire, British had some bad rolls. They scooped Arabia up with 1 guy. Almost took Transjordan. Mathematically they should have, but they missed out by 1 roll. Persia, there were actually 2 things left there, a man and artillery, but the Ottoman retreated the artillery back and brought forward some guys. The British looking pretty weak over here at the moment. Maybe the Ottoman can push forward and take some money out of Europe. Where it all started though, Austro-Hungarians took Serbia without too much loss, only 2 guys. But the big moment came when they attacked Romania and lost. They did not take out the Romanians, but the Romanians took out 7 infantry out of 8 rolls. So 5 infantry out of 6 rolls. So that was not ideal for them. Hurt the Austro-Hungarians. They were looking weak already, and then the Russians decided to send lots of stuff in, as much as they could. I believe from Sevastopol and a bit from Ukraine. And well, that is the result of that. The Ottoman now have to maybe back up Romania or protect Serbia as the Austro-Hungarians take care of that mess. Meanwhile, in Russia, the Germans made advances, pretty successful. There's more on the way. The Austro-Hungarians have a big stack in Galicia. The Russians have their big stack in Ukraine, so bit of a standoff for now. See what happens next turn on that. In Italy, the Italians, sensing the Austro-Hungarians were a bit weak, came and took Albania, just to put a bit more pressure on. Otherwise, just a standoff in Venice. Austro-Hungarians didn't feel they had enough to take it, and the Italians just didn't want to attack either. On the Western Front, we see that the Germans have launched a major assault into Belgium. Everything that could hit there, and turned out pretty well for them. Only lost one dude, and now they got a big stack there. Bringing up some more guys, but no backup in the next turn after that. See how that works for them. But the French have piled everything they can into Lorraine. So Picardy's looking a bit weak, but Lorraine strong. And so maybe they're going for a southern attack next turn. That'll be interesting to see. The Germans, amazing naval combat this round. Only lost one cruiser to the mines, otherwise the British completely failed their roles. The British buying a couple battleships in response, although those could be wiped out by the Germans next turn. Also, the cruiser and transport in Sea Zone 2 were mopped up by a couple German submarines, which in turn were mopped up by the French. So, a bit of a trade there. The Americans are saving their money. The French came and took Portugal. So, not your standard round one, but nevertheless interesting. Keen to keep playing on to round two. See what the French are doing right after this. It's now the end of round two, heading into round three. And this game is heating up. A few interesting maneuvers. The dice are hot at the moment, hit after hit. Let's start down here where the Ottoman have had a good turn. They've taken Arabia from the British, pushing the British out of Transjordan. Probably that will happen next turn. But as you can see, only a couple units left. In Persia, the Ottoman went in. The British completely destroyed. There is a bit of backup, but it does mean the British are going to have to spend more money down here. So the Ottoman are looking strong with a fighter newly bought in Constantinople. They are looking good. Here in Africa, the French have been the main contenders, taking 3 German bucks this turn, spreading out with their transports. The Germans, though, have made a nuisance of themselves. Still German alive in Angola. British could not kill that this turn. And the Italians could not get the German out of Anglo-Egyptian Sudan. So they're held up for another turn, which could hurt Egypt and the rest of Africa, because the Ottoman are on their way. Over here in Russia, as we move north, we can see, well, Romania is soundly taken now. The Austro-Hungarians didn't take it on their turn. The Russians retreated everything out of there, knowing that the Ottoman would have just taken it next turn anyway. Leaving a blocker in Sevastopol, so it's not a walk-in, but stacking everything in Ukraine, which I don't think is going to be enough for Galicia and Romania combined. I believe the Ukrainian force is going to get demolished. And then in here in Poland, the Germans have also absolutely obliterated the Russians, so Russia's looking really bad. I think they will be gone. I reckon in even 2 rounds that Moscow could be taken or at least contested. Well, big story from this round. The Italians have moved into Trieste, destroying the Austro-Hungarian fleet, which had sorted out into 17 and got demolished. And then there was just a transport left in 18, and the Italians took that out, trying to stop any cheeky Austro-Hungarian manoeuvres. But the Italians have made their way into there, taking it, taking all the troops from Albania and Venice, and just dumping it all there. Taking it pretty well though as well. I think they only lost 2 units, so they are looking strong. Austro-Hungarians are now going to have to focus everything on that. But minus $4 for them is going to hurt their economy. And the Italians, they're up to 21 bucks, so that's 7 infantry they can place down. That's just going to slow everything down. The Germans are not sending anything east this round, but instead full on launching into Lorraine. The French, who had their big stack there, got hammered from both sides, from Alsace and Belgium. They did actually have 6 artillery left with that one guy, but they retreated that back to Burgundy. So now the French have 2 forces ready to defend until the British can come over.
The British, though, got rid of the German fleet, and now there are transports in the water, and they're going to be shipping over next turn. So the Germans might have to get a hurry on, although they don't want to be too aggressive, considering that they have no backup for the next turn. Not much else. The Americans are saving their money. The French came and helped destroy the remains of the German Navy. But moving on to round 3, be interesting to see what happens. The Russians could be in trouble. The Austro-Hungarians, they need to sort their work out. And the Germans as well. They need to somehow figure out how they can defeat both Britain and France. All that and more coming up after round 3. We've come to the end of round 3, moving on to round 4. The Entente are in trouble. Let's start straight away down here, and as you can see, the British pushed out of Persia with a big Ottoman force on its way, including a fighter. The British have built up in India here, but it means they're going to have to spend more money here, meaning less money is spent defeating the Germans up in France. The Ottoman rolling in the money now, $25 for them. They collected this turn, threatening Egypt with their force from Transjordan, defeating the last of the British in there with only one more loss, so good for them. Taking Sevastopol, building a decent amount of units, 5 infantry and artillery. That's pretty good going for the Ottoman. Down here in Africa, a big struggle for the Entente to clean up the couple of German units. As you can see, the French came into Angola, no hits and no hit by the German, and the British attacked, no hits either way again. The Italians, with their infantry and artillery in Anglo-Egyptian Sudan, couldn't hit, but the German hit back, so that Italian artillery is gone. The Italians having to spare 2 men to Egypt to try just halt the Ottoman before they come rampaging through Africa, and hoping the Americans can come save their bacon. In Italy, well, the Italians, good turn for them. Austro-Hungarians sent everything that could apart from the 6 men in Triola, and that is a result of it. The Italians just demolished the Austro-Hungarians. They did bring in their guys from Venice, but that is still 7 infantry and 7 artillery left in Trieste there. And more is on the way. They collected a solid $20 this round, so they're feeling good. Russia is letting the team down for the Entente. Poland was taken, Ukraine demolished. Moscow is in trouble. You might have noticed the Russians didn't buy a fighter this game, instead focusing on pure ground units. That might have been a mistake. As you can see, the Austro-Hungarians have 7 artillery, rolling at 4. The Germans, another 4 there. So, bit of a mistake there, I think, by the Russians. But Moscow could be taken. Definitely will be contested next round. But will it be taken? Over here on the Western Front, the British have arrived. As they do, Lorraine was comfortably taken by the Germans, but massive counterattack by the French, with all of those artillery getting boosted to 4. The German fighters weren't able to arrive in time, so now there are a whole stack of artillery that are exposed to the French. So, big trouble for the Germans, I reckon, in Lorraine. But they can't retreat out of Lorraine, because if they do, the south is wide open. Up north, though, the Germans sent their 2 fighters into Belgium, a bit of a defensive force, building a bunch of units, so still reinforcements on their way, but next turn, there's not a lot coming through. So I think this is the point at the Western Front where it's a bit of a slogfest, and someone needs to do something decisive, usually the Germans, but I have seen the Entente go on massive attacks. The Americans finally have spent their $60 buying 6 men and 7 transports, so They'll be in the war next round. They'll be coming over and probably taking Spanish Morocco, and then hopefully making their way to Egypt to help out against the Ottoman. The Italians bought a fighter, just trying to hurt the Austro-Hungarians a bit more with all their artillery that are now there. But that's it. So, bit of trouble for the Entente in Africa and the Middle East and Russia. Otherwise, the Central Powers, bit of trouble, especially with Austro-Hungary. But the Germans and the French seem to be locked in battle. I don't think that's going to be moving anywhere soon. Moving on to round 4. Interesting things might happen. Tanks might be placed. The Americans will be on the war. So see you after round 4.
Well, it's now the end of round 4. And it is heating up. Oh my goodness, there is massive events this round. Super excited to show you guys what happened. Let's start here in the Middle East, where a massive standoff is happening at the moment. The British having to pour as much money as they can in here. The Ottoman, massive force in Persia with a fighter. So, a bit of a fighter battle there. I reckon whoever wins that would have a massive advantage in the overall battle. That might kick off next round. The Ottoman have elected not to go into Egypt. Most likely because of the British that have put themselves in Egypt, and the Italians deciding that they would want to defend Transjordan instead from maybe a future American attack. Although spending their $25, which seems ridiculous for them, on 7 infantry and an artillery. Down here in Africa, finally, the Germans were cleared out. Angola, those 3 French infantry, not one of them hit. The British infantry, though, that was there, hit the German, and the German hit back. Over here in Anglo-Egyptian Sudan, different story, where the French hit and the German did not. So, Germans are gone. That's $4 gone from the Germans, and a bunch of money for the Entente. Over here, Italy. Wow, Italy. Never seen such a big Italy. Collected $26 this turn. Made a bold move into Budapest. Bad dice rolls, I think, have spoiled that. If they had taken that, I reckon it would be a different story. That's an extra $6, would have knocked them up to 32. But as you can see, there was one Austro-Hungarian left. They just took Albania, just a quick walk in. Took Traola as well, so they're looking pretty good with a good amount of reinforcements as well on the way. The big story from the round though, Moscow was taken straight away by the Austro-Hungarians. Amazing rolls from them. That fighter proving pivotal. I think there were about 4 fours rolled by the artillery, so that's 4 hits, and the fighter hit itself. So maybe the Russians can learn from that. Maybe if they bought a fighter, Moscow would still be at least contested. So that is the last Russian infantry on the board, and there's one battleship there. The Germans going to start scooping up some cash. So are the Austro-Hungarians, and the Ottomans are already doing that, just to try and improve their money. The Germans are on their way back to the Western Front because there is a big standoff. The French and the Germans, and now the British, are all in a big standoff. The Germans deciding to attack the French that were in Lorraine, leaving all of that there. 11 exposed artillery, all shooting at 4 though. So the French deciding not to commit to attack for fear of losing too much stuff. Also just taking Belgium with 1 dude. Also not wanting to lose too much stuff because of all of this stuff that's on its way. The Germans buying the first and only tanks so far. And you can just see in the Ruhr 11 infantry, 2 artillery. Alsace is looking a bit weak, but then the backup after that is just insane. The French buying more fighters after losing the air battle in Lorraine, trying to get that air dominance for their artillery. The Americans are on their way, taking Spanish Morocco for the loss of 2 infantry, probably 1 or 2 more than they were hoping. Buying a plane for next time there's transports available.
The British starting to send some transports over to Canada, bring those guys over, and also obviously in France. But Ottoman playing a big role in the Western Front, taking so much money away from the British, making them spend it in India. That's really hurting the Germans, the British at the moment, and the Germans really look quite strong there. Now they don't have to worry about Russia. The Austro-Hungarians, I'm sure, will clean up this Italian mess and maybe push towards Rome. So definitely say the Central Powers are on top. But with these Americans, you never know where they might go. Maybe to Austro-Hungary or Ottoman, maybe even in France, you never know. But moving on to round 5 now, see what happens on the Western Front, and can the Austro-Hungarians clean up this Italian mess? It's now the end of round 5, halfway to double digits, and the game is heating up still. With the Russians out of the game now, we can see the Central Powers just cleaning up those bucks. The Germans going up north, Austro-Hungary taking the middle, Ottoman taking some cash down south, and well-needed cash. As you can see, they went into India and lost the air battle, which I think has really stuffed up their chances now. The British shooting with 4 on all 7 of those artillery. The Ottoman in deep trouble. Moving around some units, heading to the east, trying to defend against the onslaught of the British. Although, looking west, the Ottoman are going to have to worry about the Americans now, who have landed in Egypt. Just another nuisance for them. Africa, as I said, cleaned up last round. The French are on the move out of there. In Austro-Hungary, the Austro-Hungarians weren't able to clear out the Italians in Budapest, costing them $6. Triola as well is still there for the Italians. It's another $4 away from the Austro-Hungarians, and another $4 to the Italians. The Germans, though, in there to help, so that will be cleared out next round for sure. The Italians, though, with $26, which is ridiculous for them, almost as much as French. Building 6 infantry and 2 artillery, and starting to build up their roadblock in Venice, which could be crumpled by the tanks that the Austro-Hungarians are now building. On the Western Front, we can see that the British have arrived in force, and so have the French into Lorraine, completely demolishing the German Air Force, but not completely demolishing the German ground units. Only getting 3 hits, just 3, from every single unit that they put in, which is just outstanding. And the Germans, I believe, hitting back with something like 10 or so hits, which is just ridiculous. The French not looking good there. Could be a counterattack by the Germans, and that is going to cost the French 2 fighters if they win. The French definitely hurting from the lack of artillery, and the amount of artillery Germans have is just through the roof. And a couple more tanks being bought by the Germans this turn. The British really struggling to put units down in London when they have to worry about the Ottoman, but that might ease up, which is bad news for the Western Front. The Americans continue to build up. The British starting to ship some units from Canada over. And that's about it from this round. So things are really interesting at the moment. Still could go either way, I reckon. Paris is not really in any trouble, although it could be soon if those German tanks do well. But keen to keep playing, and I'll see you after round 6. What will happen to the Central Powers? It's now the end of round 6, moving on to round 7. And a few interesting things this round. Definitely more in the balance of the game at the moment. Let's start down here where the Ottoman have been pushed out of India by the British. The British did lose a few units doing it though. And the Ottoman also backed out of Persia, just making a big stack in Mesopotamia, but nothing to follow up at the moment. Because the Americans have arrived in Transjordan, just putting the hurt on. Not able to take Transjordan, unfortunately for them, but definitely making the Ottoman keep a few more units this way. The British took Arabia, and the Ottoman having to respond there. Didn't get good rolls, so unfortunately for them, the British are still there, which will just be a nuisance and tie those units up. The Austro-Hungarians, they've cleared out the Italians without loss this round, and now they're going to be moving into Italy itself with a couple tanks, which will, I think, be quite decisive. 2 planes can hit Venice, or actually 3. So Venice looking in trouble, although there are a good amount of units in there, good amount of units to follow up. So Italy looking all right at the moment, but I think a few rounds down the track, I think they'll be in big trouble. On the Western Front, things are looking interesting. Lots of casualties at the moment. The Germans completely backed out of Belgium. French just taking that for the cash. Because the Germans have put everything they could into Lorraine, trying to force the French to go down south, which they have successfully. And they've still got a good amount of units there. I believe that's 15 artillery with a fighter, and the French don't have a fighter. So French definitely feeling the lack of artillery at the moment, and the Germans, they just have amount after amount and stacks of them. Still building more, bought 3 more this turn, so the artillery definitely going well for the Germans. But the British are here in Picardy, and I think they'll be changing the tide of this Western Front. The Americans are on their way with a few more units and a fighter, buying more at home. The British just shipping the Canadian troops over. So definitely a whole lot less pieces on the map at the moment than when it starts as usual. And I think the Italians will be gone very soon. But things can change in this game very quickly. But the Germans still have to take Paris if they want to win. And at the moment, it's not looking too good. But if Rome falls and the Austro-Hungarians can help out in France, that might be a different story. So, going to keep playing. Moving on to round 7 next. See you after round 7. Round 7 is done. Moving on to round 8. And the game's still in the balance, I would call it. But I'll take you through what happened this round, and you can make your own judgment. The British came and took Persia with ease, but then the Ottoman did pretty much a suicide attack on Persia just to keep the British there for as long as possible. Did lose 8 infantry doing it. British did lose 3 infantry and an artillery in the attack, but not enough to stop their momentum. Buying 4 more infantry in India, but the Ottoman are sending more stuff on the way, including the guy who was taking Russian stuff. The Ottoman, I think, are just trying to take money out of Europe at the moment, trying to get the Germans into Paris as soon as possible. The Ottoman did take Arabia, but the Americans are here with the help of an Italian infantry. The Italians did nothing. They just did kind of a suicide attack trying to get a hit, which they didn't. But the Americans have come in with their fighter as well. So the Ottoman are going to have to start sending stuff down here. So more things to worry about, and there are more Americans on the way. Italy. Oh my goodness, Venice was a hot spot for battles this round. The Austro-Hungarians got terrible rolls in both offense and defense, resulting with just 1 guy left, and the Italians with a decent stack of dudes and artillery. So unfortunately for the Austro-Hungarians, they have no fighters left, which means their artillery are going to go unsupported. And I think they're going to want to buy a new one for that stack of 7 in Budapest. They are currently buying tanks, which makes sense. I know people don't like tanks, but I think they're great, just being able to absorb a hit. As I said, the Americans are on the way. Got a good system rolling now in the Mediterranean and the Atlantic, where they're buying more infantry and artillery. But the Western Front, the key battleground at the moment, where the British continue to buy units. The Germans had done a full assault into Belgium. So then the British attacked back, saw there were no fighters, trying to start clear out some of those artillery. Unfortunately, no artillery were lost for the Germans, but lots of men were. The Germans did have terrible rolls on defense, so it could be a lot worse at the moment for the British, but it's looking alright. The French trying to get some offensive punch into their lineup with 3 artillery built this turn, but they just cannot attack, otherwise those infantry are just going to get demolished. The Germans still have a big stack down here, a couple more fighters on the way. They're going to absolutely have air supremacy. And yeah, next turn could be interesting. I'm assuming all the German stuff is going to hit Belgium. But what is this stack going to do? Can they hit Burgundy, Picardy, maybe push for Paris? We'll see. That is going to be an interesting battle. But I don't think there's been one round without an attack on the Western Front yet. It has been on the whole game. The Germans, interesting buy, bought 5 artillery and 8 guys with their $44. They're really bringing in the cash, but no fighters, no tanks. So they're really looking to just get units on the board. So yeah, moving on to round 8. See what happens on the Western Front. Round 8 is done, and this game continues to throw curveballs at us. Lots of interesting dice rolls. Definitely the odds are in the Entente favour, I would say, for winning this game now. But let's start here in the Middle East, where the Americans have attacked into Smyrna. Terrible dice for them. They got, I believe, 5 hits, and the Ottoman got 7 out of their 8 hits back. So the Americans are looking much weaker, really should have taken that territory, but the dice can be brutal. The Ottoman having to spread out and do some defences, the British really backing up Persia now, the Ottoman responding accordingly, the Italians taking Arabia, just bringing up another dude because why not? Austro-Hungarians failed to take Albania with 2 dudes and an artillery. Unlucky rolls again. The Italian didn't hit back though. Venice continues to be a roadblock. The Italians, pretty decent rolls. The Austro-Hungarians, not so much. And the Italians have 16 units there. But the Austro-Hungarians have a whole stack of stuff. 11 infantry, 10 artillery, 2 tanks, and a fighter that's going to be coming in joining that. So Italy, I think, is gone. There's no way they can match against $42 that is pouring into their territory every turn when they're only getting 15. The Germans, all was not quite on the Western Front. The Germans actually took Picardy, would you believe, and marched into Belgium. Took Picardy, resounding an absolute success. The French came in with all those infantry and artillery and were able to dispatch of the 12 supported artillery as well that were left over there. The British retreated out of Belgium with all of their masses of artillery and continue to buy units in London. So yeah, the Americans got a good system going now. 3 transports on each end of the line in the Mediterranean, and 3 transports from America to Spanish Morocco each way as well. So they're just shipping over 6 units per turn, just continuing to pour the herd on. So the Ottoman, I think at the moment, are single-handedly making it that the Germans have air supremacy in the Western Front, because the British having to spend quite a bit of money down here. But that might change. So recaps are getting shorter because there are less units on the board, but the battles are getting no less interesting. So stay tuned, and I'll see you after round 9. Round 9 is done, heading on to the double-digit round, number 10. And this is where the game always gets interesting, and there's no exception to this one. The British have full control of this part of the Middle East, in Persia, buying not as many units as they would like in India, but still buying some units just to keep the flow going. The Americans have taken Smyrna with a big stack of artillery with a plane, so Ottoman have to watch out. The Ottoman tried to take Arabia with an infantry and artillery. When they attacked, there was only 1 Italian infantry, that infantry got a hit, and then the 2 Italian infantry attacked, and that is that. The Austro-Hungarians dominating the Italians at the moment in Venice, and I reckon 2 rounds time Rome will be taken. So Italy maybe got a bit too aggressive, but they had to try something as it was not looking good for Russia. But the Austro-Hungarians continue to pour unit after unit into Venice. Maybe they can help the Germans out in France, where they are pretty much surrounded at the moment. There's well over 50 units for the Entente in Picardy at the moment, including a well-massed British force. The British continue to buy infantry and artillery. Almost done shipping the dudes from Canada over, a couple dudes left. The Americans continue to buy units, another fighter, maybe in a last-ditch effort to try combat the Austro-Hungarian one. Have to find what happens there. But the Western Front, I think, is the main focus at the moment. I think it will depend on how long the Italians can hold off. Even another round of holding off makes them hold on to another round where the Austro-Hungarians aren't in France. So that's always good, but I think if the Austro-Hungarians go into France, which they can, they could just head west immediately into Piedmont and then really threaten Paris. Could be an interesting strategy to try that, but then you risk the Italians getting too big again. But I think at the moment they're only collecting $15, and that number will decline very quickly, I'm sure. So we'll see what happens there. The Germans definitely need help on the Western Front though, so they are building a lot of units, a lot of artillery, that's for sure. 5 artillery each turn for the past 3 turns, and that will continue to filter in and hopefully into Paris for them. But this game's not over. Definitely not in a good position for the Entente, but you never know. This game can change in a matter of dice rolls. So I'll see you after round 10. See what the Austro-Hungarians do. Do they go to Rome or do they go for Paris? It's the end of round 10 now. Wow, this game flies along. Feels like it should be round 20 though. So much has happened. Let's start here in the Middle East as we always do now. The British into Mesopotamia. It had a really good punch, and the Ottoman actually were down to an infantry and artillery there. They did have to back up with 5 troops, but I think the British will be taking that next turn with those guys from India hopping on the transports into Mesopotamia. The Ottoman tied up in Constantinople now by the big American attack, which was foiled by the mines. The mines sinking 2 of the transports, luckily not the one with the artillery on it, but losing 4 men and 2 transports to the mines. That has really foiled the attack on Constantinople. Otherwise, next turn the capital would be under threat. It still is with the units from Spanish Morocco, but now the Americans don't have as much punch as they would have if those mines had missed. The Italians took Syrian Desert just to try to be annoying, since they don't have much life left. Or do they? Rome was not advanced upon. The Austro-Hungarians instead decided to go to the Western Front with their massive stack. And the Austro-Hungarians continue to buy units, placing all that stuff, 8 infantry, 4 artillery and a tank this turn. It's only going to increase. They're collecting $49 this turn, highest income in the whole game now. The Germans with the second highest on 44, and oh boy do they need it. The French, in response to the Austro-Hungarians, have stacked up everything that they could into Burgundy, and the British are taking control of the north. The Germans doing an attack into Lorraine that the Entente couldn't ignore, but not with their whole force, and leaving a whole bunch of stuff in Belgium. The British continue to buy units, the French forced to buy a fighter in any hopes to stop all those Austro-Hungarian artilleries getting up to 4s. So Paris is in trouble. The Americans might have to divert some troops that way. But at the same time, they really do need to take out the Ottoman so that the British can stop spending money down there. So, not really sure how much longer the Entente can hold on. But I think we'll keep playing. Could even be 2 rounds time that Paris falls. Most likely will be anywhere from 3 to 5 is my guess, but I think the Central Powers do have this in the bag. Anyway, keep playing. See you after round 11. Halfway through round 11, the Entente have surrendered. After one decisive battle, and I'll show you which one that was. Boom, the Germans. Smashing everything they could into Picardy after a massive Austro-Hungarian assault. The best dice you'll ever see. Like, the Germans pretty much hit on every single artillery. Lots of the upgraded infantry and tanks hit as well. The British getting like 8 hits back or something, which, yeah, the Germans just amazing rolling. And that's enough to cause the Entente to surrender. Too much for them, with the Germans and Austro-Hungarians nearly making $50 each. The Italians couldn't do much. The Americans, well, they can only be bringing 6 units over a turn. So, yeah, I think game would have been ended anyway by the Germans or Austro-Hungarians taking Paris in a couple turns. So no point in continuing to play. But I hope you enjoyed watching this game. It was quite an interesting one. I really enjoyed playing it. And I hope you enjoyed watching it play out as well. But that's all from me now. Nice to be making videos again. And I'll see you in the next one. Down Under Bunker signing off.